Revenge with Karen.
Your reports are like bedtime stories for robots. Evan smirked, flipping through my audit binder like it was a takeout menu he didn't order. You actually enjoy writing this crap. He was 2 weeks in as CTO and already acted like compliance was something you could clear with a shrug and a Red Bull. That binder he mocked. It had 14 flagged items, 3 critical, on our payment gateway alone. But sure, let's skip to the part where confidence becomes liability and charisma becomes a damn contagion. Let me back up. I've been running compliance audits at Trinix Financial for 11 years. I don't make splashy PowerPoints or throw buzzwords around. I run point on risk. That means data retention, vendor redundancy, access logs, and every miserable little thing that keeps us from ending up on the evening news. My desk isn't glamorous. It's the reason our terminals have never blinked in a transaction, until they did, and the whole launch turned into a live-action catastrophe. I'm Barbara, and I don't talk much, but I write everything down. Now, before we get too deep in this corporate horror story, let me ask you something. If you're enjoying this mess unfolding, and trust me, it only gets worse, smash that like button and hit subscribe. I know, every story says that. But seriously, 93% of y'all just listen and ghost. Meanwhile, our tiny team running these true stories, we run on caffeine and your thumbs. That's it. No investors, no launch party, just receipts and revenge. All right, let's get back to Evan. He came in hot, rolled up sleeves, tech dude confidence, dropping phrases like move fast and kill legacy systems like he was Moses parting the cloud infrastructure. First week, he had a town hall. Second week, declared audits were backward-facing bureaucracy. Third week, he asked me to hold off on the Q1 system check. Said it'd slow down innovation. I just nodded. That's how I handle toddlers with LinkedIn titles. Let them trip over the things you warned them about, then point to the sign they ignored. What he didn't understand, what he never cared to understand, is that compliance isn't a suggestion. It's structural. Our payment system relied on 2 parallel gateways. A shiny new cloud-based one, his baby, and a legacy processor that had saved our butts more times than I could count. The backup wasn't sexy. It was reliable, like me. Every February, like clockwork, I'd run the redundancy resilience review. Sexy name, I know. But buried in that boring-sounding process was the confirmation that our fallback processor still talked to our infrastructure, that transaction logs were synced, that if the main system hiccuped, the backup would purr like a bored golden retriever. Clients never saw it. PR never mentioned it. But it was always there. And that's where Evan started poking the bear. He didn't like systems that didn't show up on pitch decks. Said the backup processor was costing us legacy fees for no ROI. He had the gall to say it in a finance meeting, looking at me like I was dragging down the rocket ship with my clipboard and highlighters. I swear, I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because I knew, right then, exactly how this story would end. See, Evan thought we were building a product. I knew we were building a liability. I didn't argue, not once. Let the man feel like he's winning. That's the thing about people who move too fast, they rarely check their blind spots. And mine. My blind spot was labeled April 4th, buried in an email chain, right before he told me to kill the legacy connection ASAP. But that's getting ahead of myself. Back then, I was still Barbara, the quiet woman in the corner, the woman whose audit binders were mocked as bedtime stories, the woman nobody listened to until the lights went out, the payment terminals crashed, and every investor in the room realized bedtime was over. The first time I saw Evan was balancing a cold brew in one hand and high-fiving the VP of marketing with the other, like he'd just closed a billion-dollar IPO instead of walking into his first Monday staff meeting. Guy looked like he'd jogged out of a lifestyle blog. 5 o'clock shadow, dialed in like it was part of the onboarding packet. Sneakers cleaner than our quarterly balance sheet. And the second he opened his mouth, I knew we were cooked. All right, folks, he said, clapping once like a summer camp counselor. Time to break some habits. We're not here to maintain, we're here to disrupt. Cue the nervous chuckles. The younger guys in product grinned like prom just started. Finance leaned back in their chairs. Legal shifted uneasily, as if their bones remembered the last time someone talked like this. Me, I didn't move. I've been through 5 CTOs. 3 had startup delusions. 2 got canned before their standing desks were fully assembled. Evan had teeth. Not just the ambition, but the confidence of someone who didn't even know what failure smelled like yet. He clicked to the next slide, trimming the bureaucracy tree. My name was third from the top. He didn't even look at me when he said it. Audits are good in theory, but let's be real, we're over-indexed on process, especially around legacy systems. We'll be deprioritizing internal reviews that don't tie directly to revenue. Translation, Barbara, shut up and sit down. I felt the burn in my chest, sharp and cold like biting foil. That audit he was talking about, it had already begun. I'd flagged an anomaly in the primary gateway's failover trigger. It was subtle, a subroutine that could misfire under peak load. Wouldn't show up in casual testing, only in live traffic. The kind of thing that doesn't matter until it really matters. But hey, I wait for reality when you've got momentum and vibes. After the meeting, I stopped by his office with a printout. 1 page, bullet points, clean, concise, non-confrontational. Just an FYI, he didn't look up. Put it in Confluence, he said, waving me off. If it's critical, legal will flag it. Legal had flagged it, twice. I'd CC'd them last week, but saying that out loud would have turned it into a power play. And I'm not stupid. Don't call out a new alpha dog while he's still scent marking the perimeter. So I nodded, took my paper, and walked out. Back to my desk. Back to the quiet. That week, I watched a dozen quiet safeguards get quietly murdered. Endpoint monitoring hours slashed. Vendor uptime checks paused. Backup credential rotation delayed until after launch. It wasn't malicious, just careless. That was the thing about Evan. He didn't hate safety. He just didn't believe in risk. The absence of failure was proof the process was bloated. He didn't ask how we'd avoided downtime for the last 7 years. Didn't care that it was the legacy crap that caught silent bugs before they exploded. Every safeguard, to Evan, was ballast dragging his rocket ship down. And me? I was just another weight to cut loose. He pulled me out of the infrastructure readiness thread the next day. No warning. One moment, I'm responding to a vendor escalation. Next, I'm locked out of the channel. Too many cooks, he said in Slack, smiley face and all. I stared at the screen, reread it 5 times. Then I archived the message, opened a blank doc, and labeled it, Launch CTO Overrides. I didn't say a word, not to him, not to my manager, not even to legal. Just saved the document, time-stamped every message, logged every change. I even made copies of my old audit notes and stored them offline, not because I was scared, but because I wasn't stupid. This wasn't my first rodeo. It was, however, the first one where the bull lit the damn arena on fire just to prove he didn't need fences. And all I could do was sit back and watch the crowd cheer him on. I started the underground audit on a Sunday, 6:17 a.m., with a cup of burnt gas station coffee and the spite of a woman who knew exactly how this story was going to end. Not because I'm psychic, because I've seen it before. One fool cuts the brakes, another paints the car, and then they all act shocked when the damn parade float crashes into a daycare. Evan had made it clear. My audit was canceled, my access rerouted, and my involvement in anything legacy adjacent was to be put on indefinite hold. His words, in writing, which I saved, naturally, twice. But what he didn't know, what none of them knew, is that I didn't need formal access to do my job. Not really. I'd built this compliance net from scratch, and I'd been quietly backing up the architecture, like a paranoid librarian during the apocalypse. So I did what women in my position have done for centuries when dismissed by louder, shinier men. I did it anyway. Just quieter. I ran my scripts from a sandbox server I'd spun up 6 years ago under a training license nobody bothered to audit. Just a ghost profile tied to an old vendor test account, one I'd kept active just in case. I knew the risks, knew if I got caught, it'd look like espionage. But I wasn't sabotaging anything. I was verifying. Because Evan had bet our company's reputation on a brand new gateway that hadn't passed a single failover test without throwing at least one silent error. The new system looked fine. It was clean, modern, API-driven, scalable. It was also stitched together with assumptions and optimism. And optimism is not a security strategy. So I ran my checks manually. No alerts, no automation, just line by line. Every transaction mock, every delay cascade, every idle timeout. I recorded everything, archived the logs, created a folder I called Red Sky on an encrypted drive, because that's how the air was starting to feel, red and electric, like something was about to blow. That's when the real email came. Midweek. Subject line, action required legacy shutdown approval from Evan. Sent to IT, finance, and me for visibility. I opened it, read it, then read it again, slower this time. Effective April 4th, all legacy gateway services will be permanently decommissioned to reduce infrastructure drag. These outdated systems offer no strategic advantage and have been identified as cost centers. Full sunset authorization is granted. Signed to Tevin like we were all friends on a group hike. No metrics, no risk analysis, no fallback plan, just deadweight as if the thing that had kept us afloat through 4 processor outages and 1 DDoS attack was nothing more than a budget line to be zeroed out. I stared at that line, permanently decommissioned like it was written in blood. And then I did the only thing left in my control. I replied. Not with protest, not with fire. Just a clean, light confirmation, noted and logged. For compliance, CCing legal. 4 minutes later, legal replied with a thumbs-up emoji and a file ID, their version of a shrug. So I created a new subfolder under Red Sky, labeled it April 4th Approval Trail, and saved the entire thread. I annotated it, screenshotted it, saved the raw HTML. Hell, I printed it. I've got a drawer full of receipts thick enough to choke a shredder. Silence that followed was almost impressive. Nobody questioned it. Nobody asked what the contingency was. Nobody blinked. I guess when the music's loud enough, no one notices the smoke. And me, I just kept working. Quietly, precisely. Like a coroner preparing for a funeral no one believes is coming. They didn't want my warnings? Fine. But I wasn't going to be the ghost they blamed when the lights went out. When the terminals failed. When the investors walked. 'Cause you know what happens when you bury the backup. You better pray your shiny new system doesn't blink. And Evan had just ripped out our parachute mid-flight and stapled his business card to the ripcord. The moment Evan slid that glossy, overly animated launch timeline across the table, I felt the kind of stomach drop you only get when you realize the roller coaster harness isn't latched. We're pulling launch up 3 weeks, he said, smiling like he'd just cured cancer. Investors want momentum. Let's give it to them. 3 weeks. That meant QA would be compressed into 5 business days tops. Vendor confirmations skipped, data reconciliation deferred, internal review sign-offs slashed to a single checkbox on a shared Google sheet, and stress testing, don't make me laugh. The only thing being stressed was me. I didn't speak. I didn't even blink. Just nodded like everyone else in the room. Crossed into that stage where concern looks like obstruction and facts get labeled negativity. Evan didn't want roadmaps. He wanted adrenaline, and the rest of the team, they were too afraid or too dazzled to say no. By Thursday, contractors were rolling out patches straight to production. I watched one guy, barely old enough to rent a car, merge a feature flag toggle that rewired how gateway handshakes were timed. It'll shave off milliseconds, he beamed. Milliseconds. Our entire redundancy protocol relied on time deltas to decide when to trigger fallback routing. He was shaving off the fuse that told the bomb it was lit. But who was I to question the glow of youthful innovation? I pinged QA. Was this tested in sandbox under simulated peak load? Response, not yet. Launch pressure. We'll circle back post-release. Circle back post-release. Might as well tattoo please explode later on the login screen. Still, I said nothing, because that's what happens at this stage when it all moves too fast. If you raise your hand, you don't get applause. You get blamed, you become the no person, the one holding up progress, the one not aligned with the vision. I've been there before. Been the nail that stuck up and got hammered down. I wasn't about to volunteer for the firing squad just to confirm that yes, water is wet and untested code explodes. But I did watch, and log, and document every skipped step, every modified script, every line of fake load test output piped into a Slack thread like it was gospel. The proof that the system could handle 200K simultaneous transactions. That came from a batch script that faked input parameters and looped clean responses from localhost. The dev who ran it even winked at me afterward. It's just a proof of concept, he whispered. Looks good on slides. Proof of concept? Buddy, we're not selling sneakers. Processing real-time financial transactions for enterprise clients with zero tolerance for latency or failure. But sure, let's make it look good on slides. One night, around 11:30, I stayed late pretending to fix a formatting error in an internal doc, just so I could shadow a dev who was pushing new gateway logic live. I watched him skip the rollback check entirely. We don't need it, he said. Legacy's dead, remember? Yes, I remember. Every day was a fresh brick in the Jenga tower, and Evan was pulling blocks out faster than we could stack him. There was no tension in the office anymore, just momentum. Just that quiet, eerie hum of a team too deep into the plan to admit how far off the map we'd wandered. And me, I kept nodding in meetings, smiling in hallways, drinking bad coffee and taking worse notes. Because now wasn't the time to sound alarms. Not yet. They'd just call it drama. But I saw it clear as daylight. This house wasn't built to last. And Evan had just invited the world to move in. No one asked where the fire exits were. And by the time they realized the wiring was fake, it'd already be too late. The next time I tried to access the infrastructure thread, I got a red banner that said you do not have permission to view this conversation. I blinked, refreshed, checked my roles. Still no access. I went to Slack. Gone. Tried the backup chain. Locked the thread where we tracked load simulations, failover behaviors, all the infrastructure logs. Vanished like I'd never existed. I sat there, gripping my mouse, watching my digital shadow be erased one permission at a time. 2 minutes later, an email landed in my inbox. From Evan. Hey Barbara, we've simplified the stakeholder list for infra threads, keeping it lean to move faster. Let us know if there's anything urgent. Smiley face. Always with the damn smiley face. I forwarded the email to my manager, Rick. Subject line, removed from infracomms. Please advise. He responded 20 minutes later, after what I assume was a long enough delay to pretend he was thinking about it. Evan's just streamlining the flow. Don't make waves. Let's see how things shake out post-launch. Don't make waves. Right. Like this was just a tide pool and not a tsunami forming 3 inches from his desk. I sat in silence for a full 60 seconds. Not mad, not shocked, just done because that was it. The message wasn't just Evan's. It was the company's. You're not part of the vision. And maybe I wasn't. Their vision was a plastic rocket taped together with optimism and unchecked commits, aimed straight at a cliff. They didn't want ballast. They wanted smoke. They wanted speed. Wanted someone who'd clap during the free pizza meetings and high-five contractors who didn't understand what DNS failover even meant. I wasn't that person. I never had been. So I turned back to my screen and created a new folder, Launch Fallout. Inside, I dropped a PDF, the final override memo, the one Evan sent to shut down our legacy processor. I'd annotated it with a timeline of my audit findings. Every instance, I'd flagged the exact failure scenario we were now barreling toward. Then I copied in screenshots of the Slack thread where legal signed off, complete with emojis and timestamped apathy. I added the falsified load test logs, cross-referenced with real usage data from last year's peak cycle. Labeled it clearly, fabricated metrics internal use only. Then I made a mirror of the Red Sky folder, uploaded it to an encrypted thumb drive I kept in my desk drawer behind the unused stapler no one ever borrowed. That night, I went home and poured myself a whiskey. Neat, no ice, just fire in a glass and a silence that felt less like defeat and more like waiting out a storm. I stared at the ceiling fan, listening to it click like an old hard drive. Tick, tick, tick. Let them call it red tape. Let them call it negativity. I didn't need applause. I didn't even need them to listen. I just needed the logs, the paper trail, the truth, because sooner or later someone would ask what went wrong. And when they did, I'd be ready, not to save them, but to show them. I wasn't angry anymore, just focused. Because the moment you're benched, really benched, is the moment you stop playing the game and start preparing for the audit. Launch day started like a fever dream dipped in confetti. Lobby screens were blaring promo reels with pulsing EDM. Investors swanned around in lanyards and sport coats like they were at a Tech's afterparty. Sales reps had demo iPads surgically glued to their palms, tapping and grinning like they'd already cashed their commissions. Evan strutted through the atrium like Caesar on parade, shaking hands, giving nods, flashing that smug half-smile like he'd just reinvented gravity. Giant banner hung from the ceiling, Trinix Live. The future of seamless payment begins now. Some poor intern handed me a branded thermos. I dropped it in the trash before I even hit the elevator. I wasn't invited to the war room, of course. I wasn't on that list anymore, but I knew the floor, knew where they'd be, and more importantly, I knew when to show up. Because systems like ours don't fail slowly. They fail loud. 9:00:00 a.m. Launch. 9:00:17 first terminal stalls. 9:00:23 a sales rep's voice rings out, mine froze. 9:00:30 the demo app crashes. 9:00:37 internal status dashboard flashes red. 9:00:42 finance systems disconnect from the payment gateway. 9:00:40 45, all payment functions go dark, or room lit up like a casino meltdown. Alarm tones, typing, shouting. I was down the hall when I heard Evan's voice. What the hell is happening? I waited 5 seconds, just long enough for everyone to realize this wasn't a glitch. Then I walked in, slow, deliberate, like a mortician entering a birthday party. The glass doors hissed behind me. The projector screen was a wall of errors. The whiteboard had 3 hastily scrawled action items: rollback, patch, restart, none of which were going to work. Evan turned toward me, eyes bloodshot, sweat already forming under his designer collar. Barbara, finally, fix it. What's wrong with the gateway? I didn't speak. Just unzipped my leather folio, pulled out the USB drive I'd labeled with a tiny red sticker, and walked over to the terminal by the window. A few of the engineers looked at each other like they were seeing a ghost. I ignored them, slotted the drive in, clicked open the single file. One email, projected onto the wall. Evan's name, his signature, his timestamp. Subject, Legacy Gateway Decommission Authorization Date, April 4th to Infrastructure Finance Barbara CC Legal Body. As discussed, please proceed with full deactivation of all legacy payment systems. This decision is final and non-reversible. Legacy support is deadweight and must be cleared before launch. Silence. Nuclear. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. The engineers stopped typing. One of them let out a low, involuntary whistle. Another muttered, "Holy shit." Legal sat frozen, eyes scanning the email like it was a death sentence in Times New Roman. The CEO stared at the projector, lips parted, blinking slow, like maybe if he blinked fast enough, he'd wake up somewhere else. Evan, he stepped back. His mouth opened, then closed. Then opened again, like a fish choking on dry air. Finally, he managed one word. That's not, but it was, his words, his order, his ego in writing. I stood still, arms crossed, letting the silence deepen like a well. Letting every single person in that room marinate in the knowledge that the backup system, the one that would have saved us, had been ripped out at the root by the man now sweating through his shirt in front of them. Per your written instruction, I said, finally, quietly. I unplugged the USB, slid it back into my folio, walked toward the door. No one stopped me, not this time, because now they remembered who I was. Fix it. Evan barked, voice cracking under the weight of reality finally catching up to his fantasy. Barbara, you've been here forever. You know the system. Get it back online. He was pointing at the frozen terminals like I had a magic wand in my back pocket. Like I could just conjure the legacy system back from the grave he personally buried it in. The projector behind him still had the email I'd opened. His own words, signed, sealed, and delivered with all the swagger of a man who thought risk was a bedtime story. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't match his panic. That would have ruined the moment. Instead, I stepped to the side of the room, pressed a few keys, and queued up the next email on the display. It was a response from the payment processor. Dated April 5th. Subject line, Legacy Gateway Deactivation Confirmed. Body, Hi Evan, as requested. Our team has now permanently disabled all legacy gateway services tied to your account. Please note that reactivation will require full system rebuild and recertification. Best, Alex Chambers, Senior Engineer, Clearwater Payments. I zoomed in on the line. Permanent deactivation. Full rebuild required. Legal, who had been sitting upright like someone glued to the edge of a roller coaster, let out a soft, involuntary "oh." No. The CEO, a man who had spent the last month preening in investor calls and hyping this launch as the future of digital transactions, stopped mid-sentence. He had been on the phone, presumably with a board member. The line went dead in his hand as he stared at the email. His face dropped like a child who just found out Santa was a Ponzi scheme. Nobody spoke. Even Evan's breath sounded loud. He tried again, softer this time. Can't we just reroute to something else? I tilted my head like I was trying to decipher a new dialect of corporate denial. We had something else, I said evenly. You called it deadweight. I believe those were your words. Another screen clicked on, automated logs from the launch. Transaction failure cascades. CPU overload on the new gateway. No fallback system engaged. Why? 'Cause there wasn't one. Evan turned to legal, as if hoping someone might say this could be patched with a clause or a press release. Legal didn't move, so I kept going. I opened a folder marked pre-launch warnings and began clicking through files. Each had a timestamp. Each was a flagged issue. Each had me CCing legal, infrastructure, Evan. All ignored, all logged. One by one. April 2nd. Failover handshake not syncing with new protocol. April 3rd. Load test results appear duplicated. April 4th, confirmed, legacy system deactivation will leave us without fallback. And then the final note. A message I had quietly placed in our internal compliance log, never pushed, never politicized, just stored for when, not if, this moment arrived. This launch, without legacy support, has a single point of failure. I have documented my objections. If anything breaks, recovery will not be possible within real-time SLA. Signed, Barbara Carlson, Compliance Lead. Dated, verified, time-stamped. I didn't have to explain what SLA meant. They knew, or at least legal did. Evan finally sat down, his body folding into the chair like air was leaking from his skin. The room wasn't hot, but he looked drenched. His hand went to his forehead, then to his mouth, then back to the desk like maybe gripping it would stop the freefall. I didn't gloat, didn't raise an eyebrow, didn't say I told you so. That would have been for me. This wasn't for me. This was for the record. I had warned them. I had logged it. I had kept the receipts. And now the paper trail was doing all the speaking for me. Measured, precise. Inescapable, not revenge. Just reality, delivered in 12-point font and the undeniable tone of someone who never stopped doing her job, even after they cut her out of the room. Eagle's hands were shaking. Not dramatically. Not like in the movies. Just that small, human tremble, fingertips vibrating slightly as they flipped page after page from the binder I'd pulled out of my bag and laid on the war room table like a quiet guillotine. I'd printed it last night. On my home printer. On the off chance someone decided to play dumb. Inside, every audit note, every flagged item, every warning I'd issued, highlighted, dated, annotated with polite, professional phrases like action recommended, and risk increases if not addressed. I'd even included cross-referenced footnotes for system dependencies, fallback routes, and technical contacts who had stopped responding once Evan took over. The binder was thick. It wasn't a gotcha. It was a eulogy. Evan leaned over the table, eyes scanning too quickly, like maybe, if he read fast enough, he'd find some loophole to crawl through. He jabbed at one page with his finger. This doesn't prove anything. She never escalated. I don't remember seeing, before he could finish the sentence, I reached into my folder and pulled out a thumb drive labeled Email Chain Archive Legal CCs. I plugged it into the terminal, opened the folder, clicked. One by one, the emails projected onto the wall. April 1st, to Evan, CC, legal subject, payment gateway load testing concerns failover body, please note discrepancies in simulated load results, recommending further validation before launch. Response from Evan, no time, we'll handle it post-deploy. April 3rd, to Evan, legal subject, legacy gateway final recommendation body, disabling the legacy system removes our only real-time fallback. Strongly recommend delaying removal until post-launch. April 4th, to legal subject, deactivation proceeding against recommendation body, confirming I was overruled, documenting for compliance purposes. Attachment, PDF memo with timestamp and my signature. Each one was marked red by legal. Each one had Evan's name on the CC line. Each one was saved, exported, archived. I had built the digital paper trail like a slow drip Roman fora for warning. Every part of me had hoped I'd never have to use it. Now it was blaring across a 10-foot screen while the company choked on the smoke of its own arrogance. Evan didn't say another word. His jaw worked like he wanted to argue, but he knew, we all knew. That's when I heard it, from the back of the room. Low, tired, and not meant to be loud. Why the hell didn't we listen to her? A board member. One of the quiet ones. The kind who sits through meetings with eyes half shut, always calculating. Now fully awake, fully aware. Silence again, heavy, not just embarrassment, consequence. Everyone in that room had touched this thing, had ignored a warning, laughed at process. Applauded Evan's push to trim the fat. I was the fat, and the fat had receipts. No one said sorry. That would have been too clean. Instead, they stared at me like I'd been hiding in plain sight all along. Not a naysayer, not dead weight, just a lighthouse they ignored until the waves hit the rocks. And in that moment, I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel anger. I felt the quiet gravity of vindication, because I hadn't sabotaged anything. I'd just paid attention. And now, like a projector flickering at the end of a film reel, they were finally seeing what I'd seen the whole time. Too late, of course, but perfectly, unmistakably clear. The security guys didn't say a word. They just walked in, whispered something to the CEO, and flanked Evan like they were escorting a malfunctioning robot out of a data center. He didn't resist. He didn't plead. He just stared at the floor with this dazed, open-mouthed look, like he'd just watched his own obituary scroll across the projector screen and was still trying to process the headline. No raised voices, no slammed doors, just a quiet, humiliating extraction. The kind of exit that doesn't leave behind just silence and the stench of failure still baking into the carpet. A moment later, the CEO stood up and looked around the room. "We're calling off the launch," he said flatly, like someone announcing a canceled birthday party after the cake had already been cut. "Shut it down. Pull the demo terminals. Cancel media." He didn't ask for opinions. There were none to give. The room deflated like a punctured air mattress, screens dimmed, laptops closed, fingers pulled away from keyboards like they'd been burned. He turned to me then, still standing, still holding my leather folio like a priest with the final sermon in hand. "We need to rebuild," he said slowly, "and we're going to need you in leadership." I held his gaze, not cruelly, not smugly, just level, like I was looking through the offer, not at it. "I appreciate that," I said. "But no," he blinked, "no, I'll document what happened. I'll hand over everything. But I'm not climbing back into a sinking ship just because the captain fell overboard." He didn't respond, just nodded once, heavy and slow. Maybe respectful, maybe exhausted, maybe both. I walked out of the war room and into the hallway, where the echo of chaos hadn't quite reached. Phones still buzzed. Coffee still steamed in abandoned mugs. Downstairs, the oversized launch banner still hung over the atrium like a cruel joke. "Future of seamless payment begins now." I pulled out my laptop, connected to the guest Wi-Fi, and opened my drive. Inside, launch fallout. Inside that, every memo, every audit, every email chain. A timeline of ignored warnings wrapped in polite language and escalating concern. I zipped the folder, renamed it Lessons Learned Zip. Then I opened a new email. To Investor Relations at Trianix.com subject. Post-launch documentation. Review body. Attached is the full audit package documenting compliance risks identified and escalated prior to launch. I trust this will help you assess what went wrong and why. Please note, all content has been reviewed and archived internally. No further action required on my part. I attached the file, hit send, closed the laptop, walked down the hallway, past Evan's office, past the war room, out the glass doors, into the daylight. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel vindictive, just finished. I did my job. I warned them. I documented everything. I watched it all fall, not because I let it, but because they chose not to listen. My job was never to win arguments. It was never to get credit. My job was to audit risk. They made it real. You're the real stars of the corporate jungle. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe, or I'll flick the switch on your old cubicle memories.